I'll never forget the day my life changed forever. You know when you were your father's last hope to run his businesses and continue what he had started? I didn't know that my small misstep would cost me everything, including what my father had worked hard for. If someone was once in my situation, what would you have done? How would you have dealt with the greedy and selfish husband? Let me take you over to what happened before the whole ordeal. So I, F30, met this fine gentleman while we were in university. We were studying at University of Johannesburg, UJ, in South Africa. I was doing my third year in business psychology, which was my last year to obtain a bachelor degree. My aim was to get a master's degree on the same course, so I was going to continue studying till I got my qualification. Well, my goal was to start a business coaching company, helping business owners develop their soft skills, such as communication, flexibility, leadership, problem solving, and time management. My husband, M34, was doing his fourth year of diploma in business law. We met at campus. I was in a cafeteria sitting alone going through my books because I had a test coming up, so I needed to focus more in order to pass, which meant I didn't need any distraction. I was revising some questions when Brian came and sat down on the table I was at. He was a clean and handsome guy. His spectacles suited him very well. Though he looked like a snob, he was still handsome. He asked if I needed any help because I looked stressed. And yes, I was stressed. The test was stressing me out, but I had to do what I had to do right. I ignored him for obvious reasons. 1. Being I didn't want to entertain university boys, I had to focus on what I went to university for. 2. I didn't want any destruction. His handsome snobbish self was a destruction enough, but I didn't want to give him that satisfaction. He kept trying to converse with me until I asked him to go, and I didn't need his help, which he didn't do. I was relieved when it was time for my next class, so I left him there without saying anything. He kept coming whenever he was on lunch break or didn't have any class, trying to talk to me and asking me out on an ice cream date. I was charmed by his enthusiasm, but I wouldn't show him. I wanted him to sweat a little. You can't expect a girl who gets everything at home to just jump and say, okay, let's go out for ice cream, right? As much as I got everything at home, my father was a businessman, and my mother was a head of department, Chad, at Spark Randburg High School. I was the only child they had. I admired my parents' relationship. As much as my father was not perfect, but he was an awesome parent. My mom, on the other hand, Sai, was a very strict parent. She always wanted perfection, but nonetheless, she was a great mom. The love they shared was so amazing to a point that I looked at them as my role model. They shared everything, did everything together, but most importantly, they loved each other very much. That's what I wanted when I got married. Okay, enough about my parents, let's go back to my husband. So after the whole month rejecting him and him not giving up, I eventually agreed and went out with him. We started getting along from there. As snobbish as he looked, but he was funny and had the brains. We started off as friends. We would go out a lot, trying out new restaurants. He was from a big township called Davidon. As time went by, we got closer each and every time we spent time together. He lived in one of the student apartments in Auckland Park, which was not far from our campus. I loved spending time with him. I would miss him when he was not around, or if I didn't talk to him for a day. I think I fell in love with it. Or didn't I? He became my best friend. We shared almost everything. During December holidays, he was supposed to go home in Davidton, but he didn't, since he took holiday jobs to cover his studies and send money home. He came from a financially stretched home, which made it his responsibility to take care of his family and his study fees. He had 3 younger siblings who depended on him and a mother who was an alcoholic. As much as his background was not good compared to where I was coming from, I fell in love with him. I used to go to his workplace to bring him lunch. He took a job as a bartender at one of the busiest nightclubs during weekends. He used to do night shifts because it would be busy at night, plus it was a festive season. And worked as a waiter during the weekdays when he didn't have classes. I loved the way he was dedicated and tried everything for his family and himself. I remember it was the 16th of December, which was a public holiday. He invited me to his home to meet his siblings and mother. I admired the relationship he had with his siblings. He had that fatherly love and warmth. His mother was a very kind and welcoming woman, but her alcoholic behavior was a problem. I asked him what had happened to their father, and I saw sadness and sorrow in his eyes, so I didn't ask anything further. All I wanted to do was to love him and his family despite their background. My mother once asked if I had a boyfriend because I was going out a lot, even on holidays. Well, I used to spend holidays with my family or visit my father's hometown called Greytown in KwaZulu-Natal. I was not ready to get lectures from my mother, so I denied having a boyfriend and told her that I was going out with friends. Brian was the only person I enjoyed spending time the most with. My childhood friends would complain, saying that I have changed and they felt like I had ditched them for a dude I met at campus. Well, my friends were snobs and discriminative. I told them about my relationship with Brian, but they didn't approve of it because he came from a background with a low standard of living. I hate people who judge others by their background while they don't even know their own background. They just know their parents and their big homes. My father taught me to embrace where I was coming and never judge or look down on other people despite where they were coming from. So hearing my friends talk low of my boyfriend as if he was not trying to better his life changed our friendship, which made me spend more time with Brian than with them. My father always reminded me the importance of family, knowing your roots and respect, which was why he made it his mission to take me to his hometown, to know about his roots, which are mine also. As strict as my mother was, I was glad she was not like my friends' mothers. I liked them, but they were too big for their own shoes. They forgot the importance of humanity and respect for others just because they were married to people who had money. I won't say they were rich, but they were affording. My mother was also from Greytown. Her and my father were high school sweethearts. Cute, right? The people I called friends used to say Brian was just with me. Because of my parents' money and he didn't love me, he was just using me to gain something. After they had said that, I completely ended the friendship because it was fake. So the only person who became my friend was my boyfriend. Brian and I dated for 2 years. He had finished with his studies and graduated. I was so proud of him. I introduced him to my parents a year after we had started dating. My father welcomed him, but my mother was a little suspicious of him, though she tried by all means to hide it. My mother gave me a lecture on how I should not trust Johannesburg boys. When we start being intimate, we should use protection, because she didn't want unplanned pregnancies and the boy would run. She was so caught up in what everyone was saying about Johannesburg boys and its city. She said Johannesburg was only a city for opportunities, not to find a soulmate because life was too fast, especially for the ones who came from the villages. I understood her, but I was not going to fear that Brian would change me someday or leave me for another person. Would he? He was not perfect for everyone, but he was for me. I mean, he was my man after all, so I didn't need anyone's validation to see that he was perfect for me. He got an opportunity to be a legal intern at Total Energies Marketing South Africa, Pty Ltd, which was based in Johannesburg, CBD. Brian and I started talking about building our own family. He is also a Zulu native, so he understood the procedure of taking a Zulu girl. He had big dreams for our future, his family's future. I don't know what went wrong with him. We were so much in love and nothing would get in between us. That time I was doing my 5th year, working towards getting my master's degree in business psychology. My father introduced me to his business associates who needed some advice and wanted to venture into other businesses, which I gladly accepted because it would help me gain connections and experience. My father had a logistic company that he started after he had bought a farm back at home. He already had livestock that he had inherited from my late grandfather. With his Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, it came in handy when he bought a farm and increased the number of his father's livestock. Village people used to buy his cows whenever they were to host ceremonies until this one time when his livestock almost got stolen. He decided to buy the farm, not only for his livestock's safety, but to also expand his business. He started by getting orders from supermarkets around Greytown to deliver fresh fruits and vegetables. His fruits and vegetables demands got high. Then he decided to buy a truck that would transport the goods to retail markets. That was when his business expanded to other cities, later got orders outside the province. I remember all this because he used to take me to the farm and taught me the importance of working hard for your own wealth. My father was my inspirer. I remember when his business was not doing well. His accountant or financial advisor had stolen a lot of money and didn't pay taxes, so the South African Revenue Services, SARS, wanted to shut down his businesses until he had paid the money he owed. My father was so devastated because the guy had gone AWOL. He went through a depression phase because of the pressure he was getting from SARS. I thought I was losing my father that time. He had resorted to alcohol and started shouting at my mother for no reason whenever he was drunk. The sour home situation went on until my uncle, who was a lawyer, helped him with the case and found him a business therapist, who then helped him get over the depressing phase he was going through. A couple of months later, the person who had stolen money from my father was found and got arrested. That was when I got in love with business psychology studies. I wanted to help business people who were going through what my father went through. I saw how my father was when his business was in jeopardy of being closed down and how depressed he was. It didn't only affect him, but it also affected us as the whole family, including the family that stayed in the village. I never wanted to see any business owner struggling or going through something like what my father went through. I didn't want to see businesses being shut down because of selfish and greedy people like that financial manager he had. I was so determined to make my father proud, even if it was the last thing to do. So I studied hard to achieve my goals. 7 years of studying business psychology was no child's play, but it was worth it. I had a very patient and supportive partner. We dated for the full 7 years, but he had paid for my bride price, which is called lobola in our culture. Every cultural procedure, so we were only left with white and traditional wedding. He proposed when I was doing my 5th year, then visited my family to show respect and do what was right. I thought he was my soulmate. I remember when my father asked if I was ready for marriage, I told him that I was ready, but I wanted to graduate first. So the traditional and white wedding had to wait till I got my master's degree. We traveled all the way from Johannesburg to KwaZulu-Natal for the lobola negotiations. My baby had to travel for 6 hours with his family from Johannesburg to Greytown. I was the happiest woman. I got to be with the man of my heart. Guys, you don't know how much I loved my husband. Did I count the chickens before they hatched? I knew he loved me, he showed that to me in every way, and he made me the woman amongst others. At least he made me believe he loved me. I completed my master's degree, and as planned, we started planning for our wedding. He was still working at Total Energies, but not as an intern, but as a permanent legal advisor. Wait. Before I tell you about our wedding plans, on my last year in university and during my exams, I received a call from some lady, name withheld for personal reasons, saying that I should tell my fiancé to be a responsible parent or she would bring their child to live with me since I was the stepmother. I couldn't get angry at my husband for something the woman had said, so I had to ask him first. That time we had bought a small house, enough for us. Well, more like he bought a house because he believed that when a man had paid the bride price to the bride's family, he should have his house where he would stay with his fiancé or wife. In Zulu culture, once the bride price or lobola has been paid to your family, as the bride you are no longer allowed to stay at home but at your house, since it has always been said that the man without his missing rib is no man, just like Adam was lonely without Eve. When he came back from work, I had prepared his favorite meal, which was steamed bread and sugar beans, which was, and still is, a Zulu's traditional dish along with cow's head, also known as inhloko. I even went as far as preparing him bathing water, imagine. So he came back earlier that day. It was like he knew what I had planned. We had our dinner over a small conversation. I didn't want to make him see that I knew about his child. I then randomly asked if he was to hear that I had an affair outside our relationship and got a child, but gave up the child, and he found out from someone else. What would he do? Which was something that was not going to happen, or most females with a good mindset would do, no matter what the struggle was. After my question, he looked at me and asked if there was something I wanted to tell him that he didn't know. He kept dodging my question by asking me other questions. Surely he thought I was the one with a secret. If I had gotten pregnant outside our relationship, how would I have hidden the tummy because we had been living together since he went home to pay for my bride price? It's impossible and insane, right? I told him that I had no secrets and I was just trying to make a conversation. He got so angry that night and told me that if he were to find out that I had cheated, he would do something really bad to a point that I would curse the day we met. I was so confused and surprised by his outburst, which meant that he had a secret. I let that slide, not because I was a fool or something, but I was protecting my peace in order to stay focused at least until my exams end. Since that night, he would come back home very late, saying he was busy at work, but I knew that his knockoff time was 16 euro. He avoided me for the whole week. I didn't care less because I was also swamped with exams, so I didn't need his childish behavior to distract me. After I had finished my final exams, he said we should start with wedding preparations because there was no time to waste anymore, since we had wasted more time waiting for me to complete my studies. He wanted us to get married before my graduation, which I declined, and told him that we would start wedding preparations after my graduation, which obviously made him angry and impatient. Was I wrong or selfish to ask him to wait for my graduation before wedding planning? I got confused by the sudden rush, because he even suggested that we should go to court or home affairs and get married there, since I wanted to wait for my graduation before planning a big wedding. I didn't know what was going on with him, but whatever it was, raised some red flags in our relationship. I didn't tell anyone, not even my father, that my fiancé had changed on me. In our culture, it is believed that a woman builds her home and makes sure that she stays. Even if the steel is hot, you have to be patient and bear with your husband or fiancé. I kept everything on my chest, and because I loved him, I agreed to go to court with him just to get a wedding certificate. Mind you, I didn't even tell my parents about that plan, but I believed in my husband, so I agreed. We got married in a community of property. I know what was foolish of me, but it was what I thought was good for me and my husband to have a joint marriage. Few months after our secret wedding, I graduated. I was so happy that I had reached the destination that I had always wanted to reach. I didn't care about finding a job because my goal was to open my own practice in which I would get the help from my father. He introduced me to his business associates and those who had ideas of starting businesses to coach them. It had always been my dream to make my parents proud and see me graduate, especially my father and I fulfilled that wish. Time passed. My father's connections helped me a lot to get on my feet. My husband and I were on good terms, no more fights or grumpiness. We were the couple that fell in love in university. We were happy again, and I still had kept the girls' call a secret. We started with our wedding planning. He didn't want us to hire a wedding planner, he said. Hiring a wedding planner is a waste of money, and he was not marrying a wedding planner but me, so I am the one who should be hands-on during my wedding preparations with the help of my mother or siblings so that I can get everything I wanted and needed for our wedding to be perfect. I understood that, but my mother went ahead and hired a wedding planner saying that she didn't give birth to me to suffer. My husband was told that the planner was my distant cousin, because we didn't want him to find out that Mom had hired someone to plan our wedding, while he said he didn't want any planner. My husband was weird and acted like a snob for someone who came from a township. The wedding was planned and the date was set. After a month, we tied the knot in front of our families and friends. My father was so happy, he even shed a tear during his speech. I was the happiest woman alive. I got to spend and celebrate the union of my husband and I. Few months after our wedding, my husband's mother had passed on due to lung cancer, which meant he had to take responsibility for his siblings, even though they had grown old enough to look after themselves. It was really sad. My husband was devastated and pushed everyone away, but I had to be there for him through it all. I had made a vow in front of our family, friends, a priest, and God, so I had to stand by him, whether he was pushing me away or not. After his mother's death, he resorted to alcohol. He changed a lot. From going out early in the morning to coming back late at night. He would come back intoxicated and end up saying hurtful words to me. I thought it was grief, but that went on till I couldn't take it anymore. I got so lonely in the house. Yes, I was working and got busy sometimes, but I missed my husband. I had missed spending weekends with him, but he was nowhere to be found. When I raised the issue, he would tell me that he was the man of the house, and he was not going to tolerate being asked about his whereabouts by a woman. The only duty I had was to be a wife, not a detective. It was emotionally draining having to be patient for someone who had changed on you and made you feel unloved anymore. Sometimes I would visit my parents, but it would only be a day thing, not a sleepover. As much as I wanted to share what was happening in my marriage, I had no one to share my marriage problems with. I started going out on solo dates. The stress and tension was too much. Going out really helped me. I once heard a phrase that says, when a lady is stressed, shopping is the best therapy, which was not true to me because I was not a person who took shopping as therapy. So shopping was not what would make me happy or forget about what was happening in my house. One night I went to this pub and restaurant called the Guildhall Pub and Restaurant to relax my mind. When I arrived, it was packed. And to find out that there was an event happening, it was a great distraction for me and my mind. I needed it, and I felt alive again. I forgot all about my marriage problems and my sudden changed husband. I mean, we didn't even get to our first-year anniversary at least. It was only a few months after we had said our vows, and he changed. He became a stranger at our home. All I wanted was for him to recognize me as his wife and let me into whatever he was going through. I thought it was grief, but no, it wasn't because his siblings would call me and ask if they could speak to him. His phone was unreachable. I had so much fun at the pub and restaurant. I got to hang out with strangers. We drank, danced, and ate. It was a lot of fun. I felt alive and free again. I felt like I was my old self. Not that I was going out and getting drunk, but I was free and happy. I missed being my old self, not a jailed wife. Was I wrong to choose myself for once? So there was this guy, name withheld for safety and personal reasons, who was with the strangers that I had befriended. We clicked, the conversations between us were flowing. It was like we had known each other for a very long time. We had a great time together. Then from there we became close friends. He became my shoulder to cry on. He gave me advice without judging me. My marriage lacked happiness, attention, affection, and time. That guy gave me all that. He made me feel alive and took me back to the times when my husband and I were still getting to know each other. Time went by. The guy and I were pretty close. I considered him my best friend and the brother I have ever had. One weekend, I decided to visit Davidin to see Brian's siblings. I had never seen them ever since the day of their mother's funeral. I felt bad. I had been a horrible sister-in-law, and guilt was eating me up, so I went there to check how they had been holding up. Also to check if I would find my husband there because he had been gone for 3 days without calling. I was worried about him. I asked myself every day where I went wrong or what I did wrong, but I couldn't get any answers. I thought I was the problem. I started doubting myself. I had thought that maybe I was no longer enough for him or I had changed and got ugly. What was I supposed to think? I started having low self-esteem. I was sinking deep into depression. But luckily, I had a friend that I had got from the pub and restaurant. He was everything and more. I told my father about what was going on in my marriage, and the advice I got was, in marriage, you have to be patient for your husband. Just make sure not to make something that would drive him away from your marriage. I didn't understand that kind of advice because it was useless and pathetic. So I had to be patient and bear with the emotionally abusive husband. When I got to Davidin, I found the siblings alone with a toddler. What caught my attention was that the baby looked like my husband, which made me think that maybe it's the baby of that lady who once called me and told me to tell my husband to be a responsible father. I couldn't believe that my husband had deceived me. I stayed with the siblings and asked them when they had last seen their big brother. The elder sibling told me that he had come to see them 3 days ago, and he would be back on the day I went to see the siblings. The bubbly sibling, who they called her Linda, told me that he had left with some aunt. What confused me was that if he had gone with the mother of the child, why would they have left the child with the kids? It just didn't make any sense. Curiosity got the better of me. I found myself asking whose baby they were babysitting. And they confirmed my suspicions by telling me that the child was their brother's, and they had fetched him from his grandmother's house where he stayed. I couldn't believe what my husband had put me through. I mean, the time I tried to make a conversation about having a child outside our relationship, he got angry, of which I couldn't understand. And he even suspected me of cheating while he knew that he was the one who was unfaithful in our marriage. Was I a fool for thinking he had changed before our wedding? Months passed and my husband was back home, but his sudden disappearances didn't stop. I asked him about the child and he told me to mean what I came to his family for, not anything else. Ever since then, I stopped trying. I stopped begging him to treat me as his wife. I tried going back home, but the stupid husband of mine called a family meeting on me. So my parents told me to go back to my house because there was no wife who lives at home, and went back to her parents. By doing that, I would be opening the door for other women to take over my home. God knows how tired I was. I wanted to divorce him, but then I thought about my assets that I had worked hard for. He would get 50% of what I had owned, and besides, my stupid heart still loved and longed for him. I had hope that he would change. I continued going out with my best friend. I was drinking a lot. Then I went to work. My father found out about my changed behavior. He got me help. He was so disappointed in me, and I didn't blame him. One day, I was bored and needed some distraction, so I went to my friend's house. I knew he would make me feel better. I mean, he was my best friend, right? As we were chilling, he started confessing his feelings for me, which shocked me because I took him as my best friend, brother. I couldn't understand his sudden developed feelings. I rejected him and told him that I was married and he was my best friend. I didn't see him in the way he was seeing me. The guy did the unthinkable and blackmailed me to at least sleep with him or become his booty call if I didn't want my husband to find out about the times I had been spending with him and telling him about my marriage problems. I was so surprised by his sudden change. I didn't know what to do because he had been recording all our conversations, which I didn't know about. I had no control over the situation. I didn't want my husband or my father to know about my friendship with this man. So I obliged we kissed, which was the only thing we did, and agreed to be his booty call. But I gave him that promise because I wanted to get out of his house and go to the cops to report his psychic behavior. A couple of months passed, my father got sick, no one knew what was wrong with him, even the doctors couldn't find what was going on. So we ended up seeking traditional help, because in a Zulu culture, it is believed that if someone is sick and the doctors don't find anything wrong with that person, that only means one thing. That person has been bewitched, or someone was bewitching him and making him sick. When my father started getting sick, my husband came back home. He became the supportive and caring husband that I had fallen in love with. He was there for me and my family throughout the whole process of consulting with traditional healers. I asked myself who would want or bewitch my father because he was a kind person. Didn't have enemies, maybe he did, and we didn't know about them. I mean, my father protected himself a lot traditionally because it is believed that a Zulu businessman has to be protected at all times. Few weeks after the traditional healer visit, my father passed on. I was so devastated and broken. Later on, my mother followed. I felt lost, alone, and abandoned. My mother also got sick for a while. The doctors said it was stress or something that related to stress, as she couldn't take the passing of my father. Well, I didn't blame her. I also would have died if I were to lose the husband like my father, and the family members started calling her names, saying that she had bewitched my father to get the inheritance since my father left everything to me and my mother. Most family members were angry and out for blood, so my mother not making it didn't surprise me because it was over her powers. A year later, I had healed but haven't forgotten about my parents. I was more than happy that my husband had been with me during my healing process. He was so patient with me, and he became the Brian I fell in love with. Since my father's business was under my name, I asked my husband to become the business's legal advisor and put him in charge of my father's logistics company, which he did very well with because he had a plan of opening a logistic company branch in another province to grow the business, and the demand was high. So I gave him a go-ahead. There was this other day when he came back with some papers. He told me that they needed my signature. I didn't ask a lot or read them because I trusted my husband, so I signed, not knowing that I was signing my rights to him. A week later, he came back looking angry. He didn't even tell me what had made him angry. He slapped me and called me names. I was so confused and shocked by his outburst until he told me that he knew about my floozy ways with the guy I met at the pub. Since that day, my life became miserable. I was paying for the little misstep I had made. My only sin was trusting a stranger and telling him about my marriage. Worst part, even if I tried to deny it, Brian had proof, which meant that the guy had sent him everything because I got him arrested and he got out within 6 months. I thought he was not going to bother me anymore since it had been a year. I asked Brian how long he knew about the pub guy. He told me in the eyes that he knew way before my father had got sick. What shocked me the most was when he confessed to me that he was the one who killed my father, and he knew that since I was the only child they had, everything was coming to me. I couldn't believe it. All of the acts he pulled, being supportive and loving, was all an act. He even confessed that he once cheated when I was busy being serious with school and he got someone pregnant. I failed to understand how I missed everything. I mean, everything was right under my nose. His behavior kept changing like the weather. Because of my misstep, I paid a great fortune. I lost everything, including my inheritance. I was left with nothing. I regretted and cursed the day I allowed Brian to speak to me. Life changed so much that I found myself going back to Greytown to stay with my mother's family. Was I wrong to fall in love and be bared with Brian's abusive behavior? Please advise me.